Hello everyone. Before we start, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That's how YouTube keeps sending you stories like this. And now, let's get into it. I had been on the road since late evening, heading west through Montana, with the goal of reaching Spokane before the day broke. My route had taken me past Kalispell, then down toward Libby, following the long empty stretch of Highway 2 that cuts through miles of forest and mountains. I had been driving for hours in the dark, the only light coming from my headlights and the thin line of stars above the trees. The road was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound in the car feel louder than it should. The hum of the tires against the pavement, the faint rattle in the glove box, even my own breathing felt sharp against the silence outside. It was just before dawn when it happened. The sky was still a dark slate, no color yet, no hint of light on the horizon. I remember checking the dashboard clock, 4:53 a.m., and shifting slightly in my seat to keep myself awake. My thermos of coffee had run out an hour earlier, and the fatigue was settling in. I rolled the window down a crack for cold air, hoping it would help. The forest smelled damp, the scent of pine and wet earth rushing in through the opening. That was when my headlights caught movement in the ditch to the right. At first it was just a flash, something pale darting through the edge of the beam. I tensed up, foot easing off the gas, my first thought being deer. Out here, deer or elk could ruin you if you hit them. I leaned forward, eyes scanning the shoulder, waiting for the shape to break onto the asphalt, but it didn't. It stayed in the ditch, running alongside me. At first, I thought it was a trick of my tired eyes. The movement seemed wrong. It was fast, keeping pace with my car at 55 miles an hour. My stomach dropped. I gripped the wheel tighter, my pulse kicking hard as I flicked my eyes back and forth from the road ahead to the ditch. The shape was clearer now. Long, pale limbs, too long. It moved on all fours, but not like a deer. Its arms bent wrong, stretched out like it was using its hands to claw at the dirt while its legs pushed it forward. It wasn't bounding. It was pulling itself. I stared, barely believing what I was seeing. The thing kept stride with me for several seconds, its body jerking, its limbs too thin for its size. The skin looked smooth, almost hairless, stretched tight over bone. Then, without warning, it rose upright in one motion, sprinting like a man. Towered above the grass, its arms swinging low, almost dragging the ground. Its mouth hung open as it ran, jaw slack, head tilted slightly as if it was listening for something. When my lights hit its face, the eyes flashed white, not red like an animal. White, flat, reflective like glass. My chest locked up. Every instinct screamed to get away. I floored the gas, the engine whining as I pushed past 60, 70, 80. My eyes flicked to the side mirror. For a moment I swore it was still there in the ditch, arms pumping, pale face bouncing in and out of the light. Then it dropped back, fading into the darkness as the trees swallowed the ditch again. I didn't breathe for what felt like a full minute. The road stretched on empty, my car roaring as I pressed harder on the accelerator. My hands were slick with sweat, sliding slightly on the wheel. I couldn't shake the image of its arms, the way they swung almost to its knees, its mouth hanging open like it didn't need to breathe. And those eyes, white, blank, catching the beams of my headlights like a mirror. But the worst part wasn't seeing it. The worst part was after. I kept driving, pushing west, my eyes darting constantly between the road ahead and the tree line to either side. Every cluster of branches, every shadow between the pines looked like it was watching me. I forced myself to slow down eventually, dropping back to a more reasonable speed, but my body wouldn't relax. My heart was still pounding hard, my mouth dry, and I couldn't unclench my jaw. And then I started to see the eyes, not in the ditch, not right up close like before, farther back between the trees. Every time my headlights swung around a bend, the beams caught pairs of white reflections in the tree line. At first I thought it was deer again, maybe elk, something normal. But the height was wrong, too high for an animal. The spacing was wide, like they were set in a face larger than it should have been. Each time I looked, I only caught them for a split second. Then they were gone. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that fatigue and adrenaline were messing with me. I'd been awake too long, too wired after that thing in the ditch. But the more I drove, the more certain I became that I wasn't seeing random reflections. The eyes were always at the edge of the tree line, always facing the road, always following as I moved. At one point, maybe 15 miles outside of Libby, the forest opened up slightly on both sides. My light stretched farther, spilling across a wider gap of trees. That was when I saw them clearly. Two white eyes set far apart, staring straight out from the trees at the exact height of a man. They didn't blink. They didn't shift. Just stayed fixed on me until the angle of the road cut them from view. My skin crawled. I could feel goosebumps prickling down my arms despite the heater running. I reached down and turned off the music that had been playing faintly, needing silence, needing to hear if anything was coming closer. The road hummed under my tires. The engine droned. And beyond that, nothing. Just the press of the trees mile after mile. I wanted to pull over, to breathe, to get a grip on myself. But the thought of stopping made my chest tighten. I couldn't shake the image of that thing running on all fours, then rising up to sprint like a man. Its mouth slack, its eyes catching the light. If I stopped, if I stepped out onto the shoulder, what if it was already there, waiting just out of sight? The idea of being outside the car, exposed, made me keep going no matter how badly I wanted to rest. The closer I got to Libby, the heavier the sky grew, shifting from black to the first hints of gray. Dawn was creeping in, thin and colorless, but still weak. I told myself once I hit town, once I was surrounded by houses and lights, the feeling would fade. I'd laugh it off as exhaustion and nerves. I'd find a diner, drink coffee, remind myself that people live out here every day, without seeing anything like what I thought I saw. But even as the first streetlights of Libby came into view, I couldn't shake it. I slowed, pulling into the quiet streets, passing gas stations still dark, houses with their windows glowing faint from lamps inside. Civilization should have calmed me, but it didn't. My eyes kept flicking to the mirrors, expecting to catch that pale shape breaking from the tree line, running into the town behind me. I pulled into a gas station and parked under the canopy, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I shut the car off and just sat there, breathing hard, my hand still gripping the wheel. The normal world was all around me. The smell of fuel, the hum of the lights, the empty highway stretching behind. But my mind wouldn't let go. I kept seeing those long arms swinging, the mouth hanging open, the eyes glaring white from the trees. Eventually, I forced myself inside, poured a coffee from the self-serve station, and stood there under the harsh light drinking it down. People came and went. Truckers, locals grabbing something on their way to work. Nobody looked shaken. Nobody acted like anything was out there in the dark woods. I felt crazy, standing there sweating, my nerves shot. I sat in that gas station longer than I meant to. Every time the door opened, letting in a draft of cold morning air, my heart jumped. I couldn't stop picturing that pale figure slipping inside, its arms dragging low, its eyes finding me between the shelves. The idea was irrational, but it wouldn't leave me. I stayed until my cup was empty, then filled another and another as the sky lightened outside. By the time the sun finally broke the ridgeline, the gas station lot was brighter. Trucks came and went, people filled up their tanks, and the woods beyond looked less threatening. I knew I had to keep moving, but the idea of getting back on that same stretch of highway made my stomach turn. Still, I couldn't stay in Libby forever. I got back in my car, sat for several minutes with the engine running, then finally eased out onto the road again. The drive west toward Idaho felt calmer under daylight. The pines stood tall, green, and ordinary. The ditches looked empty, no pale limbs jerking through the brush. No slack-jawed runner pacing me from the shadows. But I couldn't stop scanning. My eyes jumped from mirror to windshield to side window, over and over, looking for white reflections in the trees, looking for arms too long and thin to belong to anything I should be seeing. I never saw it again that day. But the memory didn't fade. It stayed with me, sharper than anything else I've seen on the road in years of driving. I've hit deer, dodged elk, driven through blizzards and fog so thick I couldn't see the hood. None of that ever got under my skin the way this did. I don't take that stretch near Libby before dawn anymore. I'll drive late, or I'll leave after sunrise, but never again through that time between night and day. Because I know what I saw out there in the ditch, and I know it followed me. And if it was real once, there's no reason it couldn't be real again. Some things are worse than hitting a deer. Some things can keep pace at 60 miles an hour, rise up on two legs and keep running. And if you've ever driven that highway before dawn, you know how empty it feels. How easy it would be for something to step out of the trees and run beside you, mile after mile, until the sun finally came up. I can still remember the night, every mile of it as if it only happened yesterday. It was October of 2018, one of those damp British nights where the air feels heavy and wet, where the cold gets into your clothes and makes you wish you were anywhere else but outside. I had spent the day in Liverpool for work. The meetings dragged far longer than planned, the sort where you spend hours going in circles and by the end, you're drained, restless, and desperate just to be home. By the time I left, it was pushing close to midnight. I knew I wouldn't reach Birmingham until the early hours. Driving at night had never bothered me before. In some ways, I preferred it. Less traffic, fewer idiots cutting across lanes, no endless red lights to fight with, just open motorway, steady speed, and the hum of the tires carrying you along. But that night, the drive had a different weight to it. From the moment I pulled out of Liverpool and headed south, a mist was already clinging to the air. By the time I passed Chester, it had thickened into a proper fog. Fog on the motorway changes everything. The world shrinks down to the short strip of tarmac your headlights manage to catch. Everything beyond that dissolves into a gray blur. Shapes loom out of nowhere, road signs, bridges, the hulking shadow of a lorry suddenly at your side, and then vanish again as quickly as they appeared. You lose all sense of distance and space, and after a while it gnaws at you. It feels like driving through a tunnel that has no end. I was already tired. Not the kind of tired where you risk nodding off at the wheel, but that dull weariness from a day that dragged on too long. My shoulders ached from sitting through endless discussions, my head heavy with it. I turned the radio on low, more to fill the silence than to listen, and kept one hand drumming against my leg to stay alert. The heater hummed, pushing warmth into the car, fighting the damp chill that seemed to seep in through the glass. I kept promising myself, just another hour, then I'll be home, bed, warm and quiet. I watched the signs creep out of the fog, Stoke, Stafford, Birmingham, each one a reminder I was inching closer. It was near Junction 16 that I saw him. At first it didn't register, just a blur on the shoulder, a pale shape in the gray. My eyes caught the movement and my brain slowly pieced it together. A man standing on the side of the motorway, arm out, thumb raised. I hadn't seen a hitchhiker on a motorway in years. It's the kind of thing you'd expect on country roads, maybe, but not here. Something about it pulled at me, though. Maybe it was the fog, the thought of someone stranded out there in that cold, damp air. Maybe it was guilt, that whisper that says you can't just leave someone like that. I slowed, checked my mirror for lorries, and eased the car over onto the shoulder. He moved quickly. Opened the passenger door, slid in, shut it without fuss. Damp air rushed in with him, carrying a smell I couldn't place, something like stale smoke, damp clothes, maybe even earth. His jacket was thin, not nearly enough for the weather, and his jeans were dark and heavy at the knees, soaked through with wet. His hair was short, cropped, a little unkempt, but nothing wild. He nodded once, polite enough. "You headed toward Birmingham?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. Quiet, barely above the hum of the road. That was all. I nodded back, eased us into gear, and rolled back onto the motorway. At first, I tried a little small talk, half to ease my nerves, half because silence felt too heavy. I said something about the fog, how it was like driving through soup, joked that I half expected a ship to come out of it instead of a car. He didn't laugh. He didn't look at me. He just stared out the window into the gray, face pale in the dashboard light. I tried again. Asked if he'd been waiting long, if he'd been stuck out there for a while. Nothing. No answer. He didn't shift, didn't even blink that I noticed. His eyes stayed fixed on the blur outside. I told myself not everyone likes to chat. Some people want a lift, not a conversation. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he just didn't care. I turned the radio down, left him to it, and focused on the road. 10 minutes passed. The motorway signs appeared suddenly out of the fog, green and white. Names I barely registered before they vanished again. The wipers kept their steady beat. The heater pushed on. The car hummed along, steady and low. Then I glanced sideways. The seat was empty. It wasn't gradual. One moment, a man was sitting there. Thin jacket, damp jeans, silent face turned toward the window. The next, there was nothing. Just the empty seat, belt untouched, fabric unmarked. My chest locked tight. My stomach dropped hard. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I flicked my eyes back to the road, then to the seat again. Empty. The door was shut. The light hadn't come on. I hadn't heard a latch click. Hadn't felt air rush, hadn't seen the car shift with movement. Nothing. I kept driving because I didn't know what else to do. My thoughts spun, frantic, tripping over themselves, trying to make sense of it. Had I imagined him? No. I remembered the smell, the sound of the door shutting, the shift of weight on the seat. That wasn't something you hallucinate. Could he have slipped out? No, the door never opened. The car never jolted. It was impossible. Minutes stretched long, every one of them heavy. My eyes darted from mirrors to seat to road ahead. Heart hammering hard enough I could feel it in my throat. Sweat slicked my hands on the wheel. My mouth was dry. When the sign for the next services appeared, I went for it without thinking. The glow of the forecourt lights through the fog looked like salvation. I pulled in crooked across 2 spaces. Engine still running, and stumbled out. My legs felt weak, almost shaking. Inside, the smell of fried food and petrol hit me hard. I pushed straight through to the toilets, locked myself in a cubicle, and sat on the closed lid, head in my hands. My whole body shook. I stayed there what must have been half an hour, maybe more. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and steady, anchoring me. I replayed it again and again in my head. The nod when he climbed in, the faint smell of smoke, the silence as he stared out the window, and then gone. Eventually, the shaking eased. I splashed cold water on my face at the sink, stared at myself in the mirror under the harsh light. My eyes looked hollow, rimmed with red. I felt drained, emptied. When I finally walked back out, the fog still hung heavy, curling under the lamps of the forecourt, swallowing the edges of the car park. My car sat where I left it, lights faint. The passenger seat was exactly as it should be. I stood there longer than I cared to admit, staring at that seat, half expecting to see someone sitting there again. My chest thumped at the thought of opening the door and finding him waiting. But the seat was empty, clean, untouched. The rest of the drive was slow. I clung to the wheel, eyes strained at every shadow. Every shape on the hard shoulder looked like another figure waiting. My stomach twisted each time, bracing for someone to step into the beams. But no one did. When Birmingham lights finally broke through the fog, I felt relief so strong it made my chest ache. I pulled into my street just before 3. Parked outside my flat and sat in the car for 10 minutes, staring at the empty passenger seat. Inside, I left my coat on, sat on the sofa in the dark, and listened to the distant hum of traffic. Sleep never came. My head spun circles. The next day, I thought about checking news reports, maybe seeing if anyone had been hit near Junction 16, anyone missing. I never found anything. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. When I finally did, I cut it down, left details out. People either laughed or started telling ghost stories, and I didn't want either. I didn't need explanations. I had the memory. Even now, years later, I can recall every detail. The damp smell, the thin jacket, the polite nod, the way he stared out into the fog without moving, and then the sudden absence as if the world blinked and erased him. I've driven that stretch of road since. I don't stop near that junction anymore. If I see someone on the shoulder, I keep going, because that night taught me something I can't shake. One moment I was giving a stranger a lift. The next I was alone. The door never opened. The seat was empty. And there has never been an explanation that makes sense. The truth is simple and it stays with me. What I saw, what I smelled, what I felt, none of it adds up. But it happened. And once you've lived through something like that, it never leaves you. I still remember the night in 2015 when I drove the A75 between Annan and Gretna, the road that everyone in that part of Scotland calls the Ghost Road. I wasn't a believer in any of that at the time. I had heard stories, the usual kind that pass around pubs or workplaces, but I never thought much of them. Drivers see strange things at night all over the country. Long shifts, tired eyes, headlights throwing shadows across damp tarmac. It doesn't take much for the imagination to turn tricks. At least that's what I thought. That evening started off ordinary. I had been up in Dumfries with some friends. We'd met at someone's flat, had a bit of food, a couple of beers, and just sat around talking until late. It wasn't a wild night by any means. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't exhausted, and I certainly wasn't expecting anything unusual to happen on the way home. Around midnight, I offered to give one of the lads a lift back toward Gretna since I was heading that way anyway. He climbed into the passenger seat, we said our goodbyes, and we set off. By the time we left town, it was just after 1 in the morning. The A75 was the most direct route, and I didn't think twice about it. That stretch of road runs quiet at night. No lines of cars, no heavy traffic, just long, empty tarmac winding through hedges and fields. It's the kind of place where the beam of your headlights becomes the only piece of the world you see, and the rest is just blackness pressing in on all sides. You drive by faith, trusting that the road keeps going where it should, because you can't see more than 100 feet ahead. The night was damp. Not full rain, but the kind of mist that hangs in the air and clings to the road. The headlights picked it up as a faint haze, and every now and then a drop would streak across the windscreen, caught by the wipers. It was cold too, the kind of chill that sinks in once you've been outside too long. I remember fiddling with the heater, trying to keep the inside of the car from fogging up. The drive started quiet. My passenger leaned back in his seat, half awake, scrolling through his phone on and off but not saying much. We'd both had enough of conversation earlier in the night. By that point, we were just letting the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires fill the silence. I kept my eyes locked on the road, hands steady on the wheel, letting the car roll at just under 60. There were no taillights ahead, no headlights behind. It felt like we were alone on the earth. The A75 has a reputation, and not just among locals. Truckers talk about it, people traveling through talk about it. There are stories of phantom wagons, of people stepping into the road and vanishing, of strange shapes darting across. I'd heard some of them, but always laughed them off. If you drive enough lonely miles at night, your eyes will play tricks. That was always my thinking, until I saw them. At first, it was just movement, a shift in the shadows near the verge on the left-hand side. My brain instantly went to deer. It's common enough out there, and the last thing you want is to collide with one. I eased my foot toward the brake, already preparing to slow down. Then the shape stepped into the beam of the headlights, and I realized they weren't animals. They were people, a couple, walking hand in hand, crossing the road as if it were broad daylight. The man was tall, wearing a gray suit that looked oddly old-fashioned, the kind with broader shoulders and a loose cut. The woman was beside him in a blue dress, pale and bare-armed despite the chill. They didn't hurry, didn't even look in my direction, just walked calmly across the tarmac like they had all the time in the world. I hit the brakes hard. The seatbelt snapped tight across my chest, my body lurching forward as the tires squealed against the damp road. My heart slammed against my ribs. I braced for the impact, waiting for the thud, the sickening crunch of bodies against metal. But nothing happened. The headlights blazed across an empty road. No man, no woman, not even a shadow slipping away into the hedges. Just the white lines running down the center of the tarmac, clean and bare, stretching on without interruption. I blinked, leaned forward, gripped the wheel so hard my hands ached. My eyes darted across the scene looking for any trace, footprints, fabric, a flicker of motion. But there was nothing. The couple had been solid flesh and blood. I would swear to it. And now, in less than the blink of an eye, they were gone. Beside me, my passenger had gone rigid. He was leaning forward, one hand braced against the dashboard. His face was pale, his eyes wide, searching the road as frantically as mine. He hadn't shouted when I hit the brakes, hadn't said a word, but his body told me everything. He'd seen them too, clear as day. For a few seconds we sat frozen in that silence. The engine idled low, the headlights burned against nothing, and the only sound was the faint tick of cooling metal. I could feel my own pulse thudding in my throat, the echo of adrenaline running through every nerve. Slowly, I eased my foot off the brake and let the car roll forward again. My eyes stayed locked on the road, sweeping every inch of it, but it was empty. Completely empty. My passenger shifted in his seat, uneasy, but he didn't speak. Neither of us did. There was nothing to say. The rest of that stretch felt endless. Every bend, every hedge, every shadow seemed like it was waiting to spill something else into the beam of the headlights. My hands never loosened on the wheel. My shoulders stayed locked, my jaw clenched. I don't even remember if there was music on the radio. If there had been, it was drowned out by the pounding of my heartbeat. When we finally pulled off the A75 and into the glow of Gretna's streetlights, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Civilization felt unnatural after the black emptiness of the road, but I welcomed it. I dropped my passenger off without a word, then drove the rest of the way home alone, every shadow on the roadside making me flinch. I lay awake for hours after that, replaying the moment again and again. The man's gray suit, the woman's pale blue dress, the clasp of their hands, the slow, steady pace across the road, they had been as real as you or me. There was no blur, no half-formed shadow. If I'd reached out the window, I would have expected to touch them, and yet they were gone. For days afterward, I didn't bring it up. Neither did my passenger. Maybe we both wanted to bury it, to pretend it hadn't unsettled us as much as it did. But every time I thought about driving the A75 at night again, a knot tightened in my stomach. Over the following months, I began to notice how many others had similar stories. Casual mentions in pubs, comments overheard in shops, people swerving for wagons that weren't there, slamming brakes for figures that vanished, seeing animals dart across only for nothing to appear in the beams. Some laughed it off, some looked uneasy. But the pattern was there. Different details, same experience, something solid appearing, then gone without a trace. I don't claim to know what I saw. I'm not the type to jump to ghosts or spirits as an answer. Maybe it's some trick of the light, some quirk of mist and headlights and tired eyes. Maybe the brain fills in shapes when it catches fragments of movement in the dark. Or maybe it's something none of us have words for. All I know is that what I saw was as real as anything I've ever seen, until it wasn't. I haven't driven that stretch of the A75 at night since. Daytime, sure. It looks ordinary then, fields, hedges, long open road. Nothing unusual. But in the back of my mind, every time I pass through, I feel that night pressing in. I see the man in the gray suit. I see the woman in the blue dress. And I remember how quickly the world stopped making sense. Some roads keep their silence. Some hold on to things you don't want to meet twice. For me, the A75 at night is one of them. I'll take the longer route. I'll take the slower way. Anything but that stretch after dark. Once was enough. I had been on the road since late in the afternoon, leaving Tampa with a cooler bag full of gas station food, a thermos of coffee, and a plan to make it east toward Daytona before the morning. The day had been long already, and by the time I hit the interstate, I felt the kind of heavy tiredness that clings to you when you know you've been running on less sleep than your body wants for too many days in a row. My job at the time meant driving between cities, sometimes late, sometimes early, and I had learned to treat the car like a moving room where I ate, drank, and tried to stay awake with music and radio. I rolled through Orlando in the last stretch of real traffic, Even that late, a few cars darted in and out of lanes, people still heading home from bars, airports, or overnight shifts. Once I got through the sprawl, the road started to thin. The exits grew farther apart, the billboards less frequent, and the glow from the city started to fade behind me. It was some time after 2 a.m. when I passed Sanford. The road ahead was open, only an occasional truck moving slow in the right lane. My own car hummed steady at 70, and I let the cruise control carry me forward. I remember stretching my fingers on the wheel, yawning hard enough that my jaw cracked, and telling myself I'd be at the motel within an hour if I just kept pushing. The section east of Sanford has its own reputation. I knew about it, even if I never really cared. People in Florida like to tell stories about the I-4 dead zone, a stretch of highway laid over ground, where 4 settlers had been buried in the 1800s. They say the graves were never moved, that the road builders ignored warnings, and that accidents and strange things happen there more than anywhere else on that interstate. I had driven it in the daylight before and never felt anything unusual. But that night, rolling into it in the small hours of the morning, the place felt different. The air seemed thicker, heavier. A thin mist hung low in the swampy patches on either side of the highway. Trees leaned close, black silhouettes with their roots in dark water. The sky had lost its stars, just a washed-out glow far above from the direction of Orlando. My headlights reached ahead in a narrow cone, and outside of that, the world was swallowed in a gray darkness that seemed to press back harder the faster I moved. Then the first thing happened. The radio had been playing steady, a talk station out of Orlando. 2 men were joking about something political, their voices filling the car, just enough to keep me awake. Without warning, the sound cut into static. Not faded, not crackled. Just an immediate burst of sharp static like a wall dropped over the frequency. I twisted the knob, scanned up and down the dial, and found nothing but more static. Every number I tried came back the same. At that exact moment, my phone, sitting on the passenger seat running GPS, went black. No warning, no low battery icon. It just shut off completely. I picked it up, pressed the power button, tapped the screen, but it was dead. The little GPS unit I kept mounted on the dash, a backup for areas with bad service, froze in place. The map stayed on the screen, but the arrow showing my position vanished. All 3 things cut out within seconds of each other. I turned off the radio completely and sat with only the hum of the car and the tires on the pavement. The silence after all that noise hit harder than I expected. I rolled the window down an inch, thinking maybe I'd hear crickets or wind. There was nothing, just the sound of my own car moving forward. That was when I heard it. At first it was so faint I thought it was in my head, some leftover echo of the static. A high sound, quick and light. Then it came again, sharper, layered. It was laughter. The sound of children laughing, not outside, not in the distance, inside. It came from behind me. I gripped the wheel tighter, leaned forward and listened. The sound was clear now. 3 or 4 distinct voices giggling in short bursts. The kind of laugh you'd hear from kids chasing each other across a playground. It didn't belong in the car, didn't belong anywhere on that road in the middle of the night, but it was there. Every part of me resisted looking in the mirror, but I had to. I flicked my eyes up, 3 faces, small, pale, pressed against the glass of the rear window from the inside. They stared back at me, mouths open in wide grins, eyes fixed, unblinking. Their skin looked washed out in the faint reflection of the dash lights. For a split second I was certain they were real, sitting in my back seat leaning forward. I shouted without meaning to and yanked the wheel. The car lurched right, tires hitting the rumble strip, gravel spitting from the shoulder as I fought to keep control. My chest thudded with a heartbeat so strong I could feel it in my throat. I slammed the brakes until the car screeched to a stop, half on the pavement, half in the dirt. I sat frozen, hands locked on the wheel, breath tearing in and out of my chest. Then I forced myself to turn around. The back seat was empty. No faces, no voices. The dim dashboard glow lit nothing but crumpled fast food wrappers, and the jacket I had tossed back earlier. I twisted back, stared forward through the windshield, and tried to get a grip on myself. My heart wouldn't slow. Sweat ran down the side of my face and my hands shook so badly I had to pull them from the wheel and press them to my thighs. The swamp on either side of the highway spread out like black glass under the mist. The guardrail stretched in both directions with no headlights, no tail lights, no signs of another car anywhere. It was just me. For a full minute, maybe more, I sat there with the engine running and the car idling rough under me. Finally, I told myself I was exhausted. I hadn't eaten right, hadn't slept right, had driven too long. People see things when they're tired. The brain misfires, catches shadows, invents movement where there isn't any. It had to be that. It was the only explanation that didn't make me lose my grip completely. I shifted back into drive and rolled forward. The moment I moved, my phone flickered back to life on the seat beside me. The screen lit up with the charging symbol, then the lock screen, as though it had never shut off. The GPS on the dash beeped, redrew the map, and the arrow showing my car returned to center. The radio clicked back into the talk station mid-sentence, the host still laughing like nothing had happened. Everything normal again. But it wasn't normal for me. I kept one eye on the rear view the rest of the way. My shoulders locked tight, every muscle coiled like I was bracing for another jolt. No more voices came. No faces appeared. The mist thinned as I moved east, and traffic picked up again near the edges of Daytona. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of a budget motel just before dawn, I felt hollowed out. My legs shook when I got out of the car. I carried my bag upstairs, shut the door, and double-locked it before dropping onto the bed fully dressed. I didn't sleep for hours. I sat propped against the headboard, staring at the curtains drawn tight, replaying every detail in my head. I thought about calling someone, telling them what had happened, but stopped myself. What would I even say? That I saw faces in my back seat that weren't there? That my phone and radio all died at once? When sleep finally came, it was shallow and restless. I woke sweating, checked the car, and found nothing. The back seat was empty, just as it had been when I pulled over. No marks on the glass, no sign anyone had touched it. The rest of that day passed in a haze. I worked the job I'd come for, went through the motions, but I kept flashing back to the sound of that laughter. It was so sharp, so layered, so real. Not faint, not like something imagined, but clear as though I had 4 kids sitting behind me. I've driven that road again since, but only in daylight. Never again at night. I don't even risk it. If my schedule ever pushes me that direction, I plan my trip so I pass Sanford before the sun goes down. I tell myself it was exhaustion. That's the explanation that fits best, and I try to hold on to it. But every so often when I'm alone on some other stretch of highway, with only the tires and the hum of the engine to keep me company, I hear a sound under it all. A thin giggle, sharp and quick, gone before I can be sure. And every time I glance in the mirror, the back seat is always empty, but I still check. I was driving south on Route 491 near Shiprock, close to midnight. The kind of midnight where the desert feels hollow, wide and endless. The moon was thin, the kind of light that doesn't help your eyes adjust, and the sky was clear but starless from the faint haze that hangs in the desert some nights. I'd been on the road for hours, and I was tired but not dead tired, just the type of tired where the lines on the pavement start to blur if you stare too long. The stretch south of Shiprock is straight in some places, then long shallow curves bordered by brush sand, and the shadows of distant mesas. Nothing to block your view. You can see headlights for miles if they're there. And that's why I noticed when a pair suddenly bloomed in my mirror. 1 second the desert behind me was black. The next 2 white beams were locked on my bumper. At first I thought I had zoned out and just hadn't noticed a car creeping up, but that didn't make sense. Out here you see headlights crest the horizon long before they reach you. These were just there, bright, steady, too close. I let off the gas, eased down from 70 to 60. The headlights shrank with me, holding distance. I dropped it further, almost coasting at 50. They slowed too. I tapped my brakes quick, a signal, maybe a test. The beams bobbed but stayed glued to me. I pressed down harder. Took it back up to 70, then 75. The car behind matched me, never backing off, never closing in. Just that perfect, unnerving distance where the glow filled my rear view, but gave me nothing else to work with. I told myself it was nothing. Some local, someone in no hurry, maybe drunk, maybe bored, maybe nervous about passing at night. Out here, people can get strange about the open road. I'd seen trucks ride close for miles for no reason before. But this felt sharper, more deliberate. My palms were damp on the wheel. I reached over and cracked the window, hoping a bit of cold desert air would snap me into calm. The wind roared in, dry and bitter. I glanced back again. Still there. 2 points of light locked steady. I thought about pulling over. Out here, there are dirt shoulders wide enough to kill your speed and wait it out. But stopping in the middle of nothing with someone already making me nervous didn't feel like the right move. If they wanted me stopped, if that was their goal, I wasn't about to hand it over. A long stretch opened up ahead, a flat run where you could see straight for a couple miles. No headlights in front of me, no tail lights breaking the dark, just me, the lines, and the glare behind. I did something I shouldn't have. Something half out of irritation and half out of trying to scare back whoever was playing with me. I flicked my headlights off. The road went black. For one heartbeat, I was blind. Engine humming, tires singing against the pavement. I counted 1, 2, flicked them back on. The car behind me was gone, not further back, not pulling off to the side, not passing, just gone. The desert was empty again, all directions. I checked the mirror once, twice, craning my neck like maybe they'd swung off into the brush and killed their lights. Nothing but sand and sage fading into dark. My stomach dropped, and every part of me wanted to believe I had made a mistake. That maybe I'd misread the lights. Maybe I was tired enough to dream something with my eyes open. But my hands were shaking on the wheel, and the sweat at my temple told me it hadn't been a trick of my mind. I kept driving, slower now, 60 again, my eyes snapping back to the mirror every few seconds. The road curved, stretched, curved again, always empty. And yet every few miles I swore I caught them. 2 faint orbs, low, dim, never quite bright enough to be real headlights, hovering at the edge of the mirror. I'd stare and they'd be gone. But the next glance, they'd be there again, like they were testing the corner of my eye. The miles dragged. I checked the clock on the dash more times than I could count. Each time sure more time had passed than what it told me. Midnight turned into 1, then a little past 1:30. I passed no cars, no trucks, no signs of life. Just the endless road, and the thought of those lights hovering where I couldn't quite see. Near Gallup. The highway picked up more traffic, the kind you expect that late, freight trucks. The occasional car, normal, human. I let myself breathe a little. But even then, even as the red tail lights of semis filled the distance, I couldn't stop checking the mirror. I never saw them again, not clear, not the way they had been. But for the rest of that drive, and on a dozen night drives since, I've never shaken the memory of how they first appeared. How something can come from nothing in a place so wide, and vanish just the same. People talk about that stretch near Shiprock, about how many wrecks happen, how many cars end up twisted in the desert, after drivers swear they saw something on the road that wasn't there. I don't know about ghosts and I don't believe in fairy tales, but I know what I saw that night. I've thought about explanations. Heat shimmer can play tricks, but not like that. Reflections don't tail you mile for mile. Maybe it was a car with lights that failed, someone messing with me until they turned off. But I've run that sequence over and over. There was no turn-off, no exit, no dip in the land to hide them when I flicked my beams. Just blacktop and scrub stretching flat. I don't have a neat answer. What I do have is the memory of my hands locked on that wheel, white-knuckled, and the sense of being followed long after the road was empty. And every time I pass through that stretch, I don't let my eyes linger in the mirror. Because once you've seen lights appear from nowhere and vanish just as fast, you stop trusting the rear view to tell you the truth. I've been on the road most of my life, and the longer you do this kind of work, the more the nights all start to blend together. Miles of blacktop, the hum of tires, the steady vibration in your hands and feet until you don't even notice it anymore. The road becomes your world, your cab becomes your home, and the only constants are the lines painted in front of you and the endless hum of the engine. There's comfort in that rhythm, but there are also nights when that rhythm feels like it's leading you somewhere you shouldn't go. For me, one of those nights came on Highway 87 outside Amarillo. In the dead, dark hours of the morning when I saw something I'll never be able to shake from my head. It was 2015. I'd just switched over to a new company a couple of weeks before, and they had me on runs I wasn't used to yet, routes I hadn't memorized, hours that pushed me harder than I wanted to go. But that's part of the work when you're trying to make a name for yourself with a new outfit. I had dropped off a load of steel earlier that evening, and was hauling an empty flatbed back down toward Lubbock. Dispatch had me on one of those turnaround runs where you put in more miles at night than you do during the day, just to make sure you're ready for another haul by morning. I'd fueled up outside Dalhart not long before. I can still picture the little gas station, lit up under harsh fluorescent lights, the buzz of insects circling the bulbs, the cold feel of the pump handle in my hand. I grabbed a bag of jerky and 2 energy drinks from the cooler inside, the kind that taste more like chemicals than anything natural, and I figured I'd muscle through the rest of the drive. The air was cool and dry, with that faint dusty smell you only really get in West Texas, like hay and earth baked together under the sun until it becomes its own kind of scent. By the time I rolled south of Amarillo, the clock on my dash read 3:29 a.m. That's a strange hour. Not night anymore, not morning yet, just an empty slot of time when the world feels thinner somehow. The road ahead was bare, no headlights in sight, no taillights either. Anyone who knows that stretch knows how empty it gets. Flat land stretching forever in every direction, telephone poles ticking by at long intervals, the occasional tower light blinking red against a dark horizon. Out there you get used to the sound of your own thoughts, the static hum of the radio that fades in and out with no real station to hold on to. The sky was clear, black overhead with stars scattered thick across it, brighter than you ever see them in town. The beams from my headlights cut straight out into the nothing, picking up the shoulder, the brush, the fences that run along the edges of those wide fields. Every now and then a jackrabbit darted across the road, its eyes flashing in the light before it disappeared again into the dark. It was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that has weight to it, pressing down until it feels like the world is holding its breath. That's when I saw him. At first, it was just movement on the shoulder, a figure walking the same direction I was driving. It didn't seem unusual right away. People end up stranded, cars break down. Sometimes folks have no choice but to walk to the next town. But as I got closer, I realized it was odd to see someone out there at that hour, in the middle of nowhere, barefoot and moving in a way that didn't sit right in my mind. His arms hung straight down at his sides, stiff, unmoving, as if his joints didn't bend the way they were supposed to. His head was tilted at an angle that didn't look natural, bent sharp toward one shoulder. I eased off the throttle without even thinking about it, instincts kicking in. My eyes locked on him as the distance closed. I told myself maybe he was drunk, maybe hurt, maybe both. Out there, anything is possible. I flicked on my high beams when I was about 100 yards away, and that's when I saw him clear. His skin was blackened. At first I thought it was shadow, maybe dirt or road grime, but no, it was charred. His arms and legs were dark and cracked, like burned wood, with raw, blistered patches of flesh showing through where the black had peeled away. His clothes hung in strips, burned cloth swaying with each step, barely clinging to his frame. For half a second my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe there had been a fire, maybe he'd crawled out of a wreck. But there were no cars, no smoke, no sign of anything but him. As I came even with him, he turned his head toward me. That tilt became sharper, unnatural, and his mouth opened. It wasn't just wide. It was too wide, stretched past what a human mouth should do. And even though my windows were up, even though my engine was roaring as I pushed past, I heard him scream. Clear, sharp, piercing, cutting through everything else. It wasn't muffled like it should have been behind glass and steel. It was inside like it came from the cab itself. I slammed my foot down without thinking, the truck surging forward, the trailer rattling behind me as the road blurred. My hands locked so tight on the wheel my knuckles ached. My chest clamped tight like a band was cinched around my ribs. I didn't dare look back, but some part of me did anyway, eyes flicking to the mirror. There was nothing, just empty shoulder fading into the distance, the dark stretching on behind me. But the smell came next. At first it was faint, a whiff of smoke like the remnants of a fire long gone cold. Then it grew thicker, the smell of charred wood, melted plastic, something sour beneath it. And then the worst part, the unmistakable smell of burned hair and flesh. It's a smell you never forget once you've encountered it. I'd been at accident scenes before where fire had taken the car and everyone inside. It's different than anything else. Heavy and sharp at the same time. Something that sticks in your throat until you want to gag. That's what filled my cab. Thick enough I could taste it, even though I hadn't passed a fire all night. I cranked down the window, hoping maybe it was just the truck, maybe I was overheating. But the air outside was clean and dry, cool against my face. When I rolled the window back up, the stink was still there, stronger than before. I checked every gauge, tapped the dash, glanced at the vents. Nothing. The engine was running smooth, the temperature steady, no warning lights, no sign of trouble. Just that smell sitting heavy in the cab with me. I kept driving. I didn't even think about pulling over. The idea of stopping out there with that thing, or whatever it was, walking the shoulder, made my stomach clench. Rationally, I told myself it was exhaustion. Too much caffeine, my brain misfiring in the dead hours of the night. Long-haul drivers hallucinate sometimes. It happens. But the stink in the cab was harder to shake. It didn't fade. Clung to my clothes, my skin, the inside of my nose. I gripped the wheel tighter and stared straight ahead, mile after mile, waiting for the sky to lighten. By the time the first pale line of dawn showed on the horizon, the smell finally began to thin. With each mile, as the black sky shifted to gray and then to faint pink, it lifted, like the light burned it away. By the time I rolled into Lubbock just after sunrise, it was gone completely. But I wasn't. I sat there in the yard longer than I should have, engine ticking as it cooled, my hands still trembling against the wheel. I told myself I wouldn't mention it. Nobody wants to hear about shadows on the highway. Guys give you hell for less. But when I went inside to file my paperwork, one of the old drivers looked at me sideways and said, I smelled like smoke, told me to check my brakes, make sure nothing had seized. I laughed it off, but it chilled me. I hadn't been near a fire all night. I ran that stretch of highway 3 more times that month, always overnight, always the same route. I never saw him again, but every time I passed that spot, I found myself gripping the wheel harder, eyes flicking to the shoulder against my will. Sometimes I thought I caught a shape in the dark, but it was always just a fence post or a sign. Tricks of headlights, tricks of the tired mind. But the tension never left, not fully. Years later, it still hasn't. I don't tell the story much, but when I do, I make sure to leave out anything that makes it sound supernatural. Because what I saw wasn't a ghost story in the campfire sense. It wasn't someone glowing or floating or doing something impossible. It was a man burned raw, walking barefoot down a Texas highway at 3:30 in the morning. And whether he was real, or something my brain conjured in the haze of exhaustion, the smell of smoke stayed with me until daylight. That part was real. That part I can't explain away. The worst thing about it is the thought that comes after. Out there, fires happen, trucks crash, cars overturn in the middle of nowhere. People burn, sometimes before help can get to them. Not everyone makes it out. Maybe I didn't see something impossible. Maybe I just saw something left behind by someone who didn't get the chance to finish their walk. And no matter how many miles I put behind me, no matter how many different routes I run, I still find myself catching the faintest whiff of smoke sometimes when the road is empty and the night is thick, when it's just me and the yellow lines and the hum of the tires carrying me forward through the dark. I had been driving since the late afternoon, the kind of long stretch where you stop keeping track of time and just follow the line of the highway. I had started out in New Mexico earlier that day, planning to make it through to Flagstaff before crashing for the night. I'd done plenty of road trips before, but something about the desert always made them feel different. The land out there is huge and bare, and once the sun goes down, it feels like the whole world shrinks to the size of your headlights. Everything outside that pale yellow glow just disappears. I had music on at first, but after a while I shut it off. It was just noise, and the engine hum and the crunch of tires against asphalt felt steadier. The silence made me more aware, even if it also left me too much space to think. The desert night is not quiet the way a bedroom or a city at 2 a.m. is quiet. It's like a pressure, like the silence itself has weight, and the sound of your own car is the only thing carving through it. The clock on the dash read a little after midnight. I was somewhere outside Flagstaff, though I couldn't tell you exactly where. Out there, the road doesn't always bother with markers. Sometimes there are long stretches with nothing but the paint lines and cracked blacktop. No houses, no exits, no lights in the distance. Just flat desert on either side, sometimes rolling, sometimes breaking into low ridges. The stars were out overhead, but even they looked far away, like they belonged to another world. The air outside the car had dropped cold, sharper than it had been when the sun was up. The glass of the driver's window pressed cool against my arm where it rested. I'd been awake too long, that much I knew. My body felt heavy, my eyes sore, but I kept pushing because I wanted to reach town and sleep in a bed instead of curling up in the back seat again. My mind wandered in loops, snippets of conversations from earlier in the week, the rhythm of songs I wasn't playing, random things like whether I'd remembered to pack my other phone charger. But when the highway is that empty, all it takes is one thing out of place to pull you back hard into the moment. That's exactly what happened. She was standing there. At first, I thought it was nothing. Just a pale shape ahead, maybe a road marker I hadn't noticed before, or even a patch of sand catching the headlights. But the closer I got, the clearer it became. It wasn't a shape. It was a person. A woman. She stood right on the center line, barefoot, a long white dress hanging straight down to her ankles. The fabric glowed flat in my headlights, not bright like something reflective, but just enough to catch the edges. Her arms were slack at her sides, her head tilted slightly down. She didn't move, my heart kicked into my throat. I eased down on the brake, not hard enough to stop, but enough to make the nose of the car dip a little. Every nerve in my body screamed at me that this wasn't right. There was nowhere for her to have come from. No car, no house, no lights anywhere in the desert. Nothing but open land stretching out on both sides. The car carried me forward until I was even with her. I couldn't help it, I glanced sideways. That's when she turned her head. Her face was wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. It was there, but it wasn't. Like heat shimmer over a road on a blazing summer day, the way the air bends and warps what's behind it. The blur covered everything. Eyes, mouth, nose, like her features were being erased and redrawn every second. I couldn't fix on a single detail. It wasn't like darkness hiding her face. It was something else. I jerked my eyes back forward, grip locking tight on the wheel. The car carried me past her, and for half a second I thought maybe that was it. Maybe I'd just seen something strange, something I couldn't explain, but it was over. Then instinct made me glance up into the rearview mirror. She was still there. In the pale red wash of my taillights, I saw her white dress, her bare feet, her shape standing exactly where I'd passed her. Small now, distant but clear against the black road. My stomach dropped. I told myself she'd fade with the distance, just like anything else left behind. But when I looked again a few seconds later, she was closer. Not running, not walking, just there. Closer than before, as if the stretch of road I'd covered hadn't changed anything. I snapped my eyes forward, throat dry. The car hummed under me, tires whispering against the asphalt, but all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. I pressed the gas harder, 75, 80. I told myself not to look. If I didn't look, maybe it wouldn't matter. But it's impossible to resist. Your brain won't let you. The weight of the mirror drags at you until you give in. I checked again. She was still there, closer. The blur of her face hadn't changed, but her shoulders, her dress, her posture, they all looked sharper, clearer. Like she was inside my light no matter how far ahead I drove. 85 now? 90? The car shuddered a little at the speed, the engine rising into a thin whine. The yellow lines blurred together. The desert rushed past on either side, invisible. My palms slid wet against the wheel. My jaw locked tight enough that my teeth hurt. Every time I looked, she was closer. Not in steps, not in a way that made sense, just closer. It was like distance didn't apply to her at all. I tried to focus only on the road ahead, on the white markers flashing past in rhythm, on the empty black stretching forever forward. But my eyes betrayed me every time, dragged back up to the mirror, and then gone. The glass showed nothing but my own taillights glowing against the black. My chest heaved like I'd been running. I told myself it was over, that whatever I'd seen had stayed behind, swallowed by the dark. But relief didn't come. The air in the car still felt wrong, heavy, like I wasn't alone even though I was. I kept driving, mile after mile. The desert pressed close to the glass, endless and silent. My body ached from the tension. My shoulders burned. My hands cramped, my legs twitched with every adjustment of the pedal. My eyes blurred, not from sleep, but from the strain of keeping them locked forward, refusing to look back. Every patch of desert the headlights touched seemed like it could hold her again, waiting on the shoulder, waiting for me to pass. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. The clock on the dash ticked forward so slow I thought it was broken. My chest hurt from how hard my heart was working, a constant thud I couldn't escape. The only sound in the world was the hum of the engine and the rattle of a couple coins in the cup holder. And then, finally, light. Faint at first, just a soft haze bleeding into the sky ahead, then growing stronger. The low glow of town lights breaking the dark. Flagstaff. I've never been so grateful to see something man-made in my life. I kept my foot heavy on the gas until the highway widened. The signs multiplied, and the street lamps began to rise along the edges. The grip in my chest loosened. My breathing came back in shaky bursts. The dark peeled away, replaced by scattered lamps and neon bleeding into the night. I pulled into a gas station on the edge of town, bright under a canopy of buzzing fluorescent lights. I parked by a pump and sat there for a long minute, hands trembling on the wheel. I could hear the engine tick as it cooled, hear a semi rolling past on the highway, hear the steady hum of the lights above. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds. It should have grounded me, but it didn't completely. I got out finally, the air colder than I expected, smelling faintly of fuel and asphalt. I filled the tank just to have something to do, my hands still unsteady on the nozzle. Couple other cars were parked at the far end of the lot, people inside grabbing drinks or sitting with their phones. Nobody looked at me. Nobody knew. I kept telling myself it had to be exhaustion. I'd been on the road too long. My brain was making shapes out of shadows, warping details in the dark. Maybe I'd seen a patch of fog, a trick of headlights bouncing off something in the desert. Maybe it was a real woman, someone walking where she shouldn't have been, and my tired mind filled in the rest. But deep down, I knew. I know what distance looks like in a mirror. I know how headlights fade from a person you've left behind. I know how things shrink with distance, vanish into the dark. She didn't. That stretch of highway felt bent, folded in a way it shouldn't have been, like it was wrapped around something I was never supposed to see. In daylight, I've driven that road again. It's empty desert, nothing unusual, just cracked asphalt running straight to the horizon. No markers of what happened, no sign that anyone ever stood in the center line in the middle of the night. But at night when I'm forced to pass through, I never check the rear view more than I have to. I keep my eyes forward, hands tight, speed steady, because no matter how much I try to rationalize it, I can still feel the drop in my stomach when I saw her closer. And I don't ever want to see that again. I grew up in New Jersey, and when you grow up there, you hear about Clinton Road whether you want to or not. Every kid in my town had their version of the story. Some swore they saw strange lights floating through the trees. Some swore about cars that would tail you with their high beams and then vanish. But the one that stuck with me was the bridge story. Everyone knew it. Toss a coin off the bridge at night and the boy would throw it back. I always thought it was dumb. A campfire dare people kept alive because they wanted to spook each other. I never gave it real weight. Not until the night I decided to try it for myself. It was a Thursday night in early spring, about 2 in the morning. I was 20, restless, and dumb enough to think scaring myself was a good way to kill time. My buddy rode shotgun. He talked tough, but I could see he was spooked even before we reached the stretch of road. There aren't many lights out there, only long black asphalt and trees pressed in on both sides. Clinton Road isn't just dark, it swallows light. Your headlights seem to hit a wall of trees that lean over you, blocking the sky. You feel like you're driving into something alive. I'd driven parts of it before, but never at that hour. The place felt different, quiet in a way that got under your skin. My car hummed steady, but every bump or creak inside felt sharper, like sound carried too far. The forest on both sides looked endless, just a dark mess of trunks and branches. My buddy stared out his window, arms folded, tapping his leg. I told him we were stopping at the bridge. He muttered something, but he didn't say no. The bridge itself isn't much to look at during the day. Just a little span of cracked asphalt and a stone wall on each side. The kind of place you'd drive over without noticing. But at night it feels different. The road narrows, the trees crowd closer, and the bridge sits over a stretch of black water that doesn't reflect anything. When we pulled up, I killed the headlights and the world went silent. Even the engines ticking down felt loud, like I'd broken some rule by stopping there. I had a quarter ready in my pocket. It wasn't just any coin. I'd scratched a little mark into it months back while bored in class. A tiny line across Washington's head. I don't know why I used that one. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to be able to laugh later and say, look, it was the same coin all along. I stepped out, gravel crunching under my sneakers, breath fogging in the cold. My buddy stayed inside, leaning toward the window, eyes darting. I walked to the middle of the bridge, leaned over the stone wall, and flicked the quarter into the dark water. I heard it hit. A sharp clink, then the faint plop as it dropped below. That was it. Nothing else. I felt stupid. Just a guy tossing money into a creek at 2 in the morning. Then I heard it. The sound of metal on asphalt behind me. Coin bouncing once, then rolling. Clear as day, cutting through the quiet. I froze. My buddy didn't move. I could see his reflection in the car window. Body stiff like he'd turned to stone. Slowly, I turned around. Right there by my feet was a quarter. It wobbled to a stop, rolled in a circle, and fell flat. I bent down and picked it up. The scratch mark was there. The exact same one. Every hair on my neck stood up. I knew my buddy hadn't moved. He was still locked in the passenger seat. Nobody else was out there. It was just us, the car, the bridge, and that quarter I'd just thrown into water that didn't give things back. I shoved the coin into my pocket and walked fast back to the car. I didn't run, but my legs wanted to. The silence pressed harder the closer I got, like the woods were waiting for something. I slid into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and started the engine. My buddy didn't say a word. Neither did I. I hit the gas and drove, the tires kicking gravel as we pulled off the shoulder. For a few miles, we didn't speak. The road twisted and turned. Nothing around us but trees and more trees. I kept checking the rear view, half expecting headlights to pop up, but nothing came. Just dark road and the faint line of double yellow guiding me forward. The coin felt heavy in my pocket. Too heavy for something that small. We didn't stop until we hit Route 23 again, where the world felt normal, where gas stations and streetlights broke the spell. Only then did I breathe like I'd been holding air the whole time. I pulled into a lot and sat there with the engine idling. My buddy stared ahead, pale. I pulled the coin from my pocket and laid it on the dash. He looked at it, then back at me, and shook his head. That was all. I kept that quarter for years. Not because I liked having it, but because I didn't know what else to do. Throwing it away felt wrong, like it would just show up again, maybe in a worse way. I shoved it in a box in the back of my drawer and tried not to think about it. But every so often I'd dream of that night, the sound of it hitting the ground, The way it rolled just enough to make sure I saw it. Always the same dream, always waking with that weight in my chest. Clinton Road has its stories, and I guess now I've got mine. People will say it's all tricks, nerves, imagination. I'd like to believe that. I'd like to think I misheard something or mixed up coins in my pocket. But I know the mark I scratched. I know where I threw it. I know what I picked up off that road in the dark. And I know I never went back to that bridge again.